I'm reading from Play the Man, and we're up to chapter 9. This one's entitled Attention and Consideration. In 1 Corinthians 7 verses 2 to 5 it says this: Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband. And likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud ye not one another, except it be with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. And in 1 Corinthians 7, 32 and 33 it says, But I would have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. The romantic notion of marriage is that two people could become one and just live together happily ever after. But there are so many things that get in the way of this. Going out to work is one of the problems. Men, make sure you don't let your wife leave the house without making up after an argument. Someone is sure to notice that she's having a difficult time and will try to console her. Her colleagues are being fed with sexual propaganda, from posters and newspapers to television and radio, all day long. So don't expect worldly people to be any different from what they are. I know what it's like to work in the world and had my fair share of desirable temptations. To a worldly man, a married woman represents stolen fruit, which tastes so much better as it smacks of excitement. I think that one of the ways God has blessed and protected women is by allowing them to bear children and bring them up in the safety of their own homes. I don't believe it was ever God's intention for women to farm their young children out to creches and nurseries whilst they went back to pursue a career. The very curse that God placed upon Eve was actually for her ultimate benefit. I know the Bible doesn't actually say that she was cursed, but I really can't find a better word to describe the suffering she now experiences because of God's punishment. God knew Eve was vulnerable. Satan had proved that, and he cursed her to protect her. He said her desire would be towards her husband, and that the man would from now on rule over her. Many women will disagree with me concerning the man having rule over the woman, but this is what I read in the Bible. I remember what it was like when I was a child and my own mother went back to work. She put me with a neighbour who was supposed to be her best friend, but this woman treated me appallingly and would lock me in a bedroom with her big black dog standing guard on the other side of the door so that I didn't go out. I'd open the window and cry out to anyone who was listening to help me, but I don't ever remember anyone coming. Another difficulty to overcome is the very fact that your union has brought little babies on the scene. Instead of bringing Maurice and I together, this actually separated us for quite a period. The husband in any partnership wants and will always want a lover. But who does the wife give her attention to? When she has children, her physical body is literally torn apart, and the little baby that issues from her womb makes unbelievable demands. If she's a bad mother, she'll ignore the child and do her own thing, and sadly some mothers do. But if her God-given maternal instincts are allowed to function, she will find herself totally committed to her child. Because I nursed my babies, I was prepared to feed on demand, which meant that I was up 3 or 4 times each night for up to an hour at a time as I fed, winded, sorted out colic, changed nappies and mopped up sick, whilst Maurice never stirred from his slumber. When the children were sick, it was always me that was on call while Maurice slept. Everything went on as normal during the day, like shopping, cleaning or cooking, but then there was also the added duties of the babies. Absolutely shattered after a full day and night, Morris would come home from preaching engagements expecting to have some quality time with me. From somewhere in my past, I'd heard and adopted certain principles. A wife should never strike her husband, refuse him her body, or refrain from making his meals. And I always did, and still do, believe that these are good principles for a wife to hold on to in her marriage. But I was so tired and acted like a zombie, like a lump of meat, collapsing into Morris's embrace, which left us both with an utter sense of dissatisfaction. I'd unintentionally disappointed my man once again, as Morris hated to think he'd used me, preferring to wait until I wanted him. I nursed my first child, Nathan, for 12 months, which meant that my hormones were still in pregnancy mode for all that time, and my emotions in constant turmoil. Nathan demanded so much of my time that I lost the ability to give Morris the undivided attention he'd always received from me. Being unable to carry through any serious discussion without my being distracted drove Morris crazy. His utter frustration drove him to look for companionship in a man named Alex who worked for him. And he shared the revelation he had received from God with Alex instead of me. Thank God Alex was a man and not a woman. But this only emphasized to me that he had no notion of what I was going through. I was starving for lack of spiritual nourishment. And if only he had persisted, he could have at least have fed me some of the morsels he was constantly dishing out to others at his meetings. Things went from bad to worse. I'd lost my freedom. I was now tied to my child, and Morris began to take other people to the meetings with him instead of me. I lost my discipline and relationship with God, which left me feeling utterly condemned. And then I had another child, which increased the problems. I got more and more jealous of Morris being so free whilst I was so bound. He still spent time with God every morning in his study without any distraction from the children. I wanted change. I thought it only right for us to take it in turns each day and let him look after the children whilst I regained my relationship with God. He tried to comply, but it didn't work. My concentration level was down to 0. If I heard any crying, I would immediately be distracted and wonder how he was coping. I couldn't hear God. I could only hear babies. My depression worsened when I looked at myself in the mirror. I'd become a frump with no modern, nice clothes to wear. I didn't get out to do any shopping, as I was never alone without the children. Morris would complain when I wore old clothes and shabby underwear. I'd have loved to update my wardrobe, and especially my underwear drawer, as these items had always been very important to me. But we were living by faith, and Morris never thought about taking me shopping and buying me some casual wear. He'd bought me a couple of outfits to make me look nice when I sang in meetings, but these weren't practical for wearing around the house when occupied with housework and babies. It would have really lifted my spirits if he'd taken time off to encourage me in this area. It had been so long since I'd looked at clothes shops that I'd lost all confidence and didn't even know what to look for. Another major hurdle to overcome was our lack of communication. We were both very sensitive about so many issues that it was almost impossible to talk. If ever I tried to share with Morris how I was feeling, he would immediately become defensive and think I was having a go at him. If Morris didn't compliment me regarding what I was wearing, how my hair was, or what I'd cooked for his meal, I would immediately jump to the conclusion that he didn't like it, and then I would become defensive. It was a very tense period in our married lives, but it was good for me in the sense that it made me question what I really wanted out of life. Did I want to make a go of this marriage, or did I want to walk out of it? Did I want to build a future with Morris, or was I now only concerned about the children? I decided I did want a happy marriage, And I wanted the children to know what it was like to have a mum and dad who were living together because they loved each other, and not just for the sake of the children or because they wanted to keep up the appearance of being Christians. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that God had placed me in this situation to teach me something. The very fact that I was married meant that God no longer wanted me to be independent. He wanted me to be dependent on Morris. So I decided to give up the fight and stop trying to regain the freedom I had when I was childless, and allow Morris to be the head of his family as God had intended him to be. I would come completely under Morris's covering, even for my spiritual well-being and sanctification. After all, if the unbelieving wife can be sanctified by her unbelieving husband, as it says in 1 Corinthians 7 verse 14, then surely I could be. This was a major breakthrough. The strife between us ceased. Morris communed with God every day and grew rapidly in his spirituality, which made him a much better, more understanding husband to me. At night he would snuggle up as close as my advanced pregnancy would allow to let me know that he truly loved me. And he proved his love by exercising patience and not putting any pressure on me during my time of hormonal imbalance, putting more energy into working for God so that he wouldn't give way to frustration. Physical contact has always been very important in our relationship, so he made sure that at every opportunity he would kiss me, hold my hand, or give me a hug to reassure me of his love. Obviously, this made it much easier for me to respond and become more and more submissive. God must have been showing him how to handle me. I began to settle into my role as a wife and mum, and the strain of trying to be righteous was taken away. When Isaac, my second little boy, was 2 years old, Morris arranged to take me away on holiday, just the two of us. At first, I kicked and screamed against this because, being a devoted and protective mother, I didn't want to leave my children. But Morris took control and put my mind at rest concerning every detail. We were on the plane to Corfu when he asked me why I wasn't wearing any sort of necklace, to which I replied almost laughingly, "All my jewellery was stolen years ago and I don't have a necklace to wear. Don't you remember?" "Yes," he said, "that's why I bought you this." And he presented me with a rectangular gift wrap box and told me to open it. Inside was a beautiful, flat, chunky linked gold chain. I held up my hair whilst he fastened it and knew with a lovely feeling of warmth that my second honeymoon was just about to begin. There's nothing quite like a bit of romance. It works wonders. Whilst we're courting, why on earth stop when we're married? Maybe we don't think it's necessary anymore, but it is. And this is the necklace. Still wear it now. We laugh at the joke. That's no lady, that's my wife. Because wives are oftentimes just regarded as the unpaid housekeeper. But if you want your wife to act like the lady, then you must treat her like one. No matter how religious or godly you may think you are, there are times when talking about spiritual matters is a real passion killer. Paul states in 1 Corinthians 7:33 that the married man has to care for the things of the world, how he may please his wife. Be romantic and demonstrate practically that you love her. Talk's cheap. Actions speak much louder than words. Take her out for an intimate dinner without other people occasionally and treat her as special. Give her your undivided attention. Indulge her from time to time and buy her something nice, something she wants, not necessarily what you want. This will keep love alive and let her know that you're not taking her for granted. From that moment on the plane, my life took on a different turn. Even the birth of our little daughter Tamar shortly after this didn't rob us of our new understanding. I felt certain that what was happening to me with the children was for a limited period only, and in time I would have opportunities to get right back into the ministry. I still took bookings to sing and made albums, but not on the scale I used to. Tamar has been going to school for over a year now, and I can feel my spiritual life growing again. I cherish my quiet time with the Lord, whilst all the children are being educated by born-again Christians in a private Christian school, where they go through an entirely Christian curriculum. I sometimes used to take my time with God for granted or just treat it as duty, but things have changed. I must confess, though, that one of the major factors in Maurice and I getting through our difficulties was the fact that at some point we were able to talk about the things that were hurting us both most without putting up the old barriers and being oversensitive. God must have helped us to get to this place. I remember sharing something with him that I'd shared with him at least 10 times before, but this time I felt as though he'd not only heard me, but understood me, and that made all the difference. Even though maybe the circumstances were the same, just to know that he understood was of far greater importance than being able to do anything about it. I must have done the same with him too, because suddenly I began to see things from his point of view, and instead of fighting with him because I hardly saw him, I began to support him and send him away happy on his ministry engagements, knowing that we were both working towards the same end. I'm convinced that one of the deadliest enemies in a marriage is getting to the place where you can't communicate with each other anymore. There is no place more lonely than a foreign country where nobody can speak your language and you can't speak theirs. And that's how a marriage is, when there is no more understanding. I remember reading lack of understanding is a sin in the Bible somewhere, and it hit me so forcibly that I've remembered that phrase ever since. But I must have seen it in another translation rather than the authorised version, because I can't find it anywhere now. If Maurice hadn't put the effort in to seek God whilst I was going through my trials, depression, call it what you will, I don't know how things would have ended up. Maurice and I are firm believers that if you put God first in your life, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then everything will fall into place, because God will be preparing the way and preparing you at the same time.